Alright, how's it going? This is Sam Welker with thinkparticle.com, and in this video we're going to be talking about building trees with the TP Toolkit Pro. So this is thinkparticle.com really quick, and I'm just going to give a quick little sales pitch on this product. The TP Toolkit Pro is an excellent way to get started in complicated particle simulations without dropping, $300-400 on other third-party plugins for Cinema 4D, and also without having to really, know too much about Espresso. That doesn't mean that those other plugins aren't great plugins. It just means that sometimes they're a little bit out of budget, not what you can fit into your pocket. So the TP Toolkit Pro is a great way to get started with thinking particles. And what we're going to do today is show you how to work with particles emitting from other particles to create complicated tree structures. So this will be really fun, and we'll enjoy what we make. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to open up Cinema 4D. I'm working in R16 today, and we're going to open up the TP Toolkit Pro plugin. And really quick, I just want to sketch out an idea. What I want to do is take the doodle tool and show you what I'm going to make. So there's going to be a tree. It's going to go up, and it's going to have branches that will go out, and it will kind of arc like that. And it will have variation as well. So this is going to be kind of the shape of the tree, okay? So let's go ahead and grab the TP Toolkit Pro, open up our interface, and if you haven't seen this before, we've got this great interface. It has the emitters right here. These are different ways to emit objects. And they are listed alphabetically. Or this is to emit particles, not objects, excuse me. Then we have our dynamics, and most of the dynamics, like wind, gravity, and other things that you'll need, are in the TP dynamics object. Now, if you do not see a dynamic way to move or interact with your particles in here, then it's because it's in the dynamics object if you need it. And then the utilities are going to be ways to control the particles, and then we have our renderers, and these are going to be ways to view the particles. So let's go ahead and start with the TP simple emitter and the particle emitter. Then we're going to grab the curl noise, custom turbulence, and dynamics, and the TP roll, and I'll show you what we're going to do with those. Let's go ahead and get started by going into our thinking particle settings. Those are going to be found under simulate thinking particle settings, or you can hit Shift-C. Alright, so we're going to start by creating a branch or branches particle group. We're going to take our TP Toolkit group and name it trunk. We're going to create a Twigs particle group and also a leaves particle group. Okay, so let's go ahead and order these, and we're going to grab all of them and make them this really nice good brown color. If we select all of them and go into the settings on the right, this basic properties area, we can set the color of all of them at once. And what I'm going to do now is just take each of these and just make them a little brighter consecutively, and then I'm going to grab the leaves and make them green. So that looks like a branch, or excuse me, like a tree, and that'll be good. So that'll help just with the thought process of getting things set up. Now we're going to grab a tracer object, and we're actually going to want three of these, excuse me. It'll be the trunk, the branches, and the twigs, okay? So we're going to go ahead and grab our trunk and make sure that it has the trunk particle group, then the branches in the particle group in the trace link, and then the twigs, okay? And then the leaves will actually be applied later in a different form. So we can hit play, and you'll notice that absolutely nothing happens besides Cinema getting overworked. That's because it's going to go frame by frame, emitting 100,000 particles, but it's going to think for a while to get there. And that's not something you want, obviously. So I'm going to show you how to counteract that in just a moment. And I did that on purpose, by the way. That is to show you that the particle emitter needs to have particles set up a proper way. So I'm going to pause this while that gets ready. One other thing I want to show you is that also that puts 2,000 megabytes or a 2 gigabyte cap on my memory for Cinema 4D. So if you open up the thinking particle settings, You'll notice that's because we have, oh, excuse me, I think that's 1,000,000 particles. Yes, it is. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn this max particle group way down just in case something happens. And we really only need 1,000 particles for this project, I think. We're not ever going to need more than that, so we're just going to close that down. And the next thing we're going to do is turn off the particle emitter. And we'll turn that on in a second. I'll show you what that does. So give me just a moment. It is still going pretty slow. Alright, so what we're going to do now is go into our simple emitter and start there. So we're going to go to the thinking particle settings and grab that first thinking particle group and name it trunk. And we're good. Particle group, we're going to set particles per second to 1. And we're going to change the X FOV and the Y FOV both to 0. Okay. Now we need to go ahead and hit play and see how this goes. Particles just going to move out, and they're going to move in just a few different forms, and that's because of noise. I'll show you how to fix that in a second. And we had multiple particles emit. I only want one, so we're going to change the start emission on frame to 0 and the end emission on frame to 0. And what that does is now the particles are only going to emit on frame 0, so it's going to be 1 particle per second, in this case 1 per 30 frames, but it only emits on the very first frame. So what that does is that will allow the particle to emit and end up going just straight up, and it will be 1 particle. Now if I turn off the custom curl noise, the custom turbulence, the curl noise, and the roll, then you'll actually be able to see that. So I'm going to change this to a box emission, and I'm going to go to the dynamics and set this to 5 for the size. So that'll help with the particle size, being able to see a little bit better, which will be useful when we get to the roll feature. I'm going to set a little bigger, maybe 10. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is add a little variation. So we're going to add a curl noise that's used for just the trunk, and that's going to be a speed of 0.01 to start, and that'll help give it some variation, but not really too much. And then we're going to change that curl noise frequency to 30, maybe 0.00 or 0.02, and that is a little bit rapid, so we're going to set that to 20. I'm going to change this trunk color as well. So it's currently under the basic tab, use color. It's by default set to off, and I'm going to change it to on, and then I'm going to just choose screen color and just copy that particle color. Okay, so now that's going to be visible, and actually I'm just gonna make it a little bit off-white, and now our trunk is emitted, so that's great. Now we're going to emit particles from the trunk. So what we're going to do is go ahead and go to the emission attributes, and this is going to need our branches, which are going to be the particles emitted from it. So we're going to name this branches, and then we're going to have the simple emitter be trunk. Okay, and then we're going to set up the trunk as the parent particle group. And the reason we're going to do that is because now the particles are going to emit from that particle, that trunk particle, okay? So we're going to have our curl noise and all our other noises that we have set up right now that we're using be set to use the... Actually, we're just going to use the curl noise on the trunk. We're going to use custom turbulence on the branches, just as an example. And we're also going to need to set some of these settings up. So first of all, these particles go out too fast. So I'm going to set these to go for 30 frames, maybe 60 frames. That'll give them a little more detail in the splines. Actually, I want to do 30. And then I want to set it to go 50 for the speed, and then 360 for the X FOV, which is going to cause it to emit in a circle around that tree. And then it's going to have 15 degrees of variation on the Y FOV. Now, these are going up and down quite a bit, and that's because of the custom turbulence. So I'm just going to hit play without it and change these particles back down to 2 for the box size for now. Okay, that's going to be a good size, but they're not going long enough. So actually what I am going to do is change it from 30 to 90. And give me just a moment. Alright, so as you can see, because we set up those settings to have... hit the wrong button. Hit the particles... because we set up the settings for the particles to go in a 360-degree axis on the x-axis, now they're going to be going in every direction. But because they're going in a 15-degree axis on the y-axis, now they're not going to be getting in our way. So that'll be a good solution. So one thing you'll notice is that the branches are definitely leaning towards or biased towards the z-axis. And the fix for that is to add a roll function or a roll object. So we're just going to add that to the trunk and set it to 1, and then drop it under the trunk and the curl noise under the trunk, and then have the particle branches emitter later down, and that will help with a visual separation. Now that roll is going to help with that direction, and as you can see, if we make this white for a second, you'll see that it's rolling as it goes up, and now these particles are emitting in a cleaner function, and that'll help. So now we're going to go ahead and set this back to where it was roughly. Okay, and now these particles are emitting, and one thing I can do is add a little bit of gravity. I'm going to add 15 to the gravity. That's a lot stronger than I want, so we're going to set it to 5. I'm also going to set the mass, and that's going to be set to 1 for the mass and 100% variation. Now we're going to use mass dependence of 50%, and that's going to give us 50% variation on that gravity. So some branches are going to be completely pulled down, and others are going to be pulled down only 50%. So now these branches are coming down. One thing I am noticing though is that these branches come out of the very bottom of the trunk, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is turn off the emission attributes, and I'm going to say that I want them to start coming out at about frame 10. Let's say frame 10. So what I can do is set the start emission frame on the particle emitter, the branches emitter, and that can be set to frame 10 as the start emission, and now the particles won't emit until then. Okay, and now that works, and that will be good. Now we're going to add some, I'm not going to use custom turbulence in this case because it is a lot slower. The reason we have it is because it's very powerful, but it's a lot slower than curl noise. So I'm going to actually use curl noise here for the branches, also because it'll fit my taste preference. And I'm going to set the speed to 0.05 and the frequency to 20 and hit play. And now these branches are moving a lot more than they should, so I'm going to set that to 0.025. And that's okay. The next thing I'm going to do is add some turbulence as well here. I'm going to set the frequency to 0, the turbulence to 25, and the structure size to 25, and see how that works. And make sure that this is applied to our branches alone. Okay, that helps a little bit. I'm going to actually change that from 25 to 40. And that's better. Okay, so I'm going to change that curl noise speed to 0.01, and that'll be a little bit better. Okay, there we go. That's good. I do have too many particles coming out, so it's at 150 right now, but I'm going to set that to 90. Okay, that's going to be a little bit better, because we had so many branches coming out. It wouldn't really make sense to have that many branches coming out of a tree at that scale, I don't think. So at least visually for what we're going for right now. The next thing we're going to do is grab another emitter, a particle emitter, and this is going to be called the TP particle Twigs emitter. Okay, and I'm just going to use the normal names that they have, and then just add an appendage at the back that says Twigs, so that will help kind of keep that separation. And then any effectors that I use are going to go ahead and be based off of that group. So or excuse me, anything that we, any of the effectors, utilities, those sort of things that I add are going to be placed after that in the hierarchy, and that's just going to help with the visual separation. So I'm going to set this up the same way that I set up the branches emitter, and that's going to be setting the branches as the parent group and the twigs as the particle group, which is the same thing we did with the trunk in the parent group here, and the branches as the particle group for the branches emitter, but this is now going to emit particles for the twigs from the branches. Okay, so we've hit our cap of particles, and that's already happening because we have too many branches, and these need to live for 15 frames and go at 25 for the speed, set it to 360 and 360 for the parent age, and we can go ahead and add another roll. This roll, actually, I lied, we're not going to use a roll. And that's because the roll is going to be in a world axis, so it won't follow the axis of the branches for now, which would not be very useful. So another thing I'm going to do is change the max particles to 10,000 in this case, as my phone goes off. And I'm going to change it from boxes to ticks, and actually I'm going to change it to dots. And now we can see that our branches are now starting to have twigs, and that's good. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and make sure that the speed of the particles is going to be based off of the parent life, and I'm going to just pull it down on this curve right here. And I'm going to also set a random variation of 25% to that and 50% to the branches above, and I'm going to pull that curve down a little bit as well. And now as these particles get older, you will notice that the branches and twigs get shorter. So that's helpful. And I'm actually going to set this to 150. Actually, you know what? I'm going to set this to 300. And then we can just let these particles go through the entire way. I'm going to go to the branches emitter and have it emit like this. Okay, so this is going to be the emitter for the branches up top. And now if we let this run through the entire way, these particles are going to emit, and they're going to get slower. Actually, I did that wrong. What I'm going to do is just copy that, and then I'm going to reset it to the default, and then I'm going to change that to the lifespan. Okay, so now these branches are not going to live as long up top. Okay, and I'm going to pull that down even more, arc it, and then have it arc like that. Okay, great. And again, I'm gonna keep the speed. That's dying a little bit quickly for me. Let's see how that looks. And this arc is gonna help just make it a little bit more realistic. Okay, so now that tree looks pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do is go back into the twig emitter and make sure that the lifespan is affected, not the speed. Because if we're affecting these by turbulent noise at all or anything like that, just for cleanliness, it'll be a lot easier to work with just particle speed. Or, excuse me, particle lifespan. And I'm just going to have it get really short at the end. Like, almost just gone. Okay, so that's good. Those particles are dipping down a little too much at the end. So I'm going to take these branches and set it from 90 frames to emit for 70. So it's going to be even shorter. That'll be good. I am going to turn up the particles per second again and just kind of see how that turns out. Make it a little bit thicker. Okay. That's good. It's pretty cool too. And we could change the particle curl-noid's speed to 0.1, and now you're going to see that these particles are going to follow that. I'm going to set the frequency to 4, and what that's going to do is just kind of give it this broad turbulence. and that helps. One thing you'll notice is there's a lot of grouping here, and that's because of the roll. And that'll be okay though in this case, because we're going to add leaves and it'll look better that way. The branches are living a little bit longer now than I'd like, and I would like to emit less branches at the end of the lifespan, so I'm going to pull that down as well. So I'm going to arc the lifespan curve. Okay, there we go, and hit play. And now we have this tree right here, which looks great. It's just dying a little quickly and not emitting as much as I'd like. So I'm going to have it just keep going and going, and then it'll be done. Okay, good. That's a good shape. I like that. A little bit more stylized, a little less realistic. That curl noise as well is going to be great, but I'm going to drop it down to half that amount, to 0.05, because it looked like it was falling, and I don't want that. I do want it to arc, but not fall. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is, now that we have all of these set up, we're going to make sure that they are all set to on, and make sure that we match the right colors. So I'm going to have, actually what I'm going to do probably is just color them. So we're going to have yellow trunk, green branches, and then blue twigs. So you can't see the trunk very well, but that will help kind of separate visually what's going on here. And I'm actually going to make a little bit more cyan. Nope, I'm going to make that purple. There we go. And the branches are going to be a darker green. Nope, I'm going to make the branches red. So we can see them. And then the trunk is going to be that blue that we were using. And now we can see it. It's not the most, it's not the greatest way to visualize it, but I think this will help pull out that separation, which we're going to need. Alright, the next thing is those twigs could use a little bit of variation, so I'm going to add the TP Toolkit again, and I'm going to add curl noise one more time. And this curl noise is going to be used for the twigs. It's going to be set to 0.05 and probably 30 for the variation and frequency. Not variation, the frequency, which is going to cause variation. And I'm going to set these to live for 25 frames instead. I lied. They're going to be 15 frames. The curl noise is a little strong still, so I'm going to set it to 0.025, the frequency to 45, hit play. And another thing I could do here is make sure that those twigs, their lifespan is set to 50%, and also the branches 50%, and set the speed to 25% variation. And those variations are going to help with that realism. Also, the roll I can set to a laziness of a value of maybe 3, 4, 5, something like that, and that'll help a little bit break up that that variation in the beginning. However, you may notice that it is going to crush the bush right now, so what I'm going to do is just set that laziness to 1, and it does arc, which is actually really cool. But that's not going to work because the particle is facing this direction, and then it slowly arcs to adjust, and that's not going to work. I am going to add another dynamic object as well, and what this is going to do is I'm going to set a particle group to be all. I'm going to get rid of that TP particle group, and what this is going to do is this is going to be a massive wind, a massive turbulence. So I'm going to set this to 50, set it to 400, so 50 on the turbulence and 400 on the structure size. And that will allow me to have more turbulence to affect everything and give it kind of this holistic, natural look. And actually I'm going to set it to 60 and probably 180 for the structure size and see how that looks. Okay. And that's pretty good. That looks a lot more like a tree now. Looks like a good pine tree. The branches could use a little bit more, I guess, life in the beginning. Okay, that's good. Now, the last thing we're going to do is create leaves. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go ahead and first we're going to open up the TP Toolkit. Actually, before we make leaves, we're going to start by making branches. So let's go ahead and create a sweep nurbs and add a end side into it. So I created a sweep nurbs by just going right here and clicking on, or letting go of the mouse on sweep. Then I held shift when I grabbed the end side. And what that did was put it as a child of the object. Next thing we're going to do is create an instance and put that instance as a child of the sweep above the end side. So the first thing we're going to do is set the end side right there, the radius to, let's set to 10, but let's set it to 15 and set it to XZ. And then the sweep is going to be named trunk. Then we're going to copy it and name it branches. And the way to copy it is to control click. And then we're going to go to twigs. Okay, and the branches is going to be set to 3 on the radius, and the twigs is going to be set to 1. Okay, and the branches could use probably 9 sides, maybe 10 sides. Twigs will be fine with 6, and the trunk will use 12 sides. Actually, we'll use 18 sides on the radius. Now the sweep nurbs, we're going to just start dropping in these sweep nurbs. So let's go ahead and grab these. The sweep instance is going to be set up accordingly, and it isn't going entirely accurately because I set it to XZ. We're going to keep that on the XY axis. Nope, that's going to be the ZY axis. I think I did this backwards. Alright, it needs to be set to the XY axis, and it needs to have all of these instances hold the splines created by the tracer object. So now we can have all these set up. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is take the curve of the scale for the trunk, set it down. This is a lot more geometry, by the way, so I'm actually going to drop this down. I'm going to say 7 sides for the branches, 4 for the twigs. And I'm going to drop the twigs down even smaller to a radius of 2. I'm going to let that simulate through. And if I just turn off the tracers while it's simulating, then it'll go a lot quicker. Alright, so the trunk, the branches, we can hide the splines as well. And then the twigs. And the twigs are going to need to be scaled down in that curve as well. So this is really heavy geometry. And one way to help fix that is to go into, well, let's go ahead and group these by selecting them all and hitting Alt-G. And then we're going to call these, or this group geometry. And we're going to go into the splines. And we're going to sample the steps. Let's see. This is going frame by frame right now, and it's just going very quickly. So we're getting a lot of geometry detail, which is nice, but it's going to be slow when it comes to render time. So I'm actually going to emit less twigs and less branches. So I'm going to just say 75 branches and 15 twigs per second. And I'm going to not have those show just yet. Okay, that's a lot better. And those twigs are going to become visible. We'll set the sides to 3. It's still going really slow, so I think one thing I can do is turn the twigs down to maybe 10. Okay. And let that finish simulating. Just add the twigs. Okay, so these are extra geometry that are going to be nice. We're going to set it to 0.5, maybe 0.75. And I'm going to take that 3 and change that to 5. And this is great. I just need to make sure that I have less twigs because it's just taking so long. So I'm just going to set it to 7 particles per second. Hit play, let those simulate out. That's a little cleaner. And now it's all visible. Okay, so that's good. Change that 0.75 on the radius of the end side for the twigs back to a 1. And I'm going to take the splines and I'm going to add a connect object. And by holding Option, I can make it a parent of what I have selected. So I'm just going to select the trunk tracer and then make it a parent. I'm not going to weld it. I'm not going to add textures. I'm just going to leave it as a connect object. And this is going to be called the tree spline. And actually, I'm going to take the trunk out of it. And this is going to be called the branches, or branch plus twig splines. Okay, so that's going to be useful when we're emitting particles for the leaves. So I'm going to turn that geometry off for now. And we're going to go to the TP Toolkit again. And we're going to use a MoGraph emitter this time. And we're going to, let's see, we're going to add a TP alignment utility, and a TP clone geometry object. And we're going to add those and close it. And this is going to be appended as leaves for the MoGraph emitter. And we're going to go ahead and remove that extra particle group and add the particle group to the MoGraph emitter. And then we're going to emit from the connect object. And then we're going to have our leaves in the particle group set to a random direction. Then the clone geo is going to be set to a thinking particle group of leaves. Then we're going to create a polygon object, hit C, and then go ahead and type axis center and set it to 100% on the Z axis and reset. And then type reset PSR in the Shift C menu and set that to be the clone geometry object. Okay, hit play. And that's actually not working. We're gonna hit 0. I think a better way to do this actually is going to be grabbing not a connect object and not a MoGraph emitter, but a particle emitter. We'll append that one as leaves. And I'm going to take the branches and the twigs, and I'm just going to add a new particle group to the scene. And this is going to be called B plus T. And that's branches plus twigs. And those are going to get dropped under the B and T. And then we're going to have our leaves under that. We're going to make this a blue particle group. And that'll be good. So the particles are now going to be emitted from this parent particle group called B and T, which is going to be all of those particles in there. And then they're going to emit particles called leaves. And then we're going to make sure that this emits a type that says box. And we're going to leave these with 0 speed. Okay, and now we're going to have it emit 20 particles per second. And set it to be 150 for the lifespan. And that's still pretty strong, so I'm going to set that to 5 particles per second. And I'm going to turn off the particle clone geo object, the TP clone geo. And I'm also going to add a dynamics object now. And this is going to be used for the size. I'm going to set it to 2. I'm going to set this to the leaves as well for the particle group. And set a variation of 25%. Actually, I'm going to set it to 80%. And we'll try 100 and set the size to 3. See how that goes. Hit play. Now these particles will start popping up. And I do have a problem. We're going to need to make sure that that master dynamics object that's affecting all the particles is set to just the trunk. In this case, because now it's affecting our leaves, and we need those leaves to stay where they're at. Okay, so now we can change those leaves to be back to the global type of the view, and I'm going to change the dynamics size from 3 to 12, and then update the frame, and that's good. Set it to 15, update again, 20, update again. All right, we'll go with 15. No, we'll leave it at 15, and then we're going to go ahead and double the amount of particles per frame. And now these are drawing on. Because we're using the alignment, the random alignment, by the way, we're going to have all those leaves randomly affected. And another thing we could do is just set them all to just the world y-axis, and then set a variation of maybe like 90%, or we could set it to a user direction and have it set to 90% or 360%, or I guess 180, not percent, degrees. So I like that one more, 180. Also, I'm going to change the particle scale over life to be, actually I'm going to flip these knots. It's going to be a clever technique. What we're going to do is have these particles grow on over time, and these particles are living for 150 frames. So these leaves are going to grow on over time, and I'm going to set them to start at 25% value. And what that's going to do is have these particles grow. And this is going to be a good way to cheat the particles being a little bit smaller on the edge. So I'm going to hit play and let them grow. Going to clear out the geometry so that it doesn't update for a second. And go to probably frame 180 before I get too much further. I'm going to change that polygon back to leaves. And really quick, just to be smart, I'm going to save this. So let's go to Think Particle, Tutorials, and this is going to be TP Toolkit Make a Tree. All right, good. And now we're going to add that leaves geometry back to the cloned object. And those particles are going to be a little bit smaller on the edge now than they are in the center, if you can't tell. So that'll be helpful. And for now, I'm just going to create two textures, one for the leaves and one for the trunk or branches. And what I'm going to do for the leaves is set this view type to plane. I'm going to set actually plane backlit, and I'm going to set the luminance to have the effect of backlight and set it to be a greener color. Maybe not so green. I'm going to set the shadow intensity to 80 and the illumination to 20, maybe 40. Brighten it up a bit, pull that intensity down, then give this a green value as well. Okay, that's good. And then I'm going to change the render to be a little bit, just ever so slightly reflective, and add some roughness to that. And now you can see that it's working. It's really bright though. And I do want it to have a fall off, and in this case I think I'll just use a water fall off, which is 1.33. Maybe I'll dial that up or down a bit. Dialing it down just a bit gives it a little bit more of a waxy look. which is going to be helpful in this case. And then I'm going to use a bump with a noise that's going to be set to 1200 on the y-axis. Maybe we're going to set it to 2400. And then I'll just set that to like 3, maybe 5, and set the global scale to 25. And we're going to set that y-axis to 10,000 actually. Set the global scale to 10. Okay, and the strength to 1. And what that's going to do is give us a little bit more of an organic, natural look to it. Set it to 2 maybe. Okay. Now I need to set the alpha, and I'm going to just create a layer, and this is going to be a gradient. And what I'm going to do is set it to be a circular gradient, and I'm going to drop it down and set it to none for the interpolation type, and set it to be circular. And I'm going to now create another gradient, and this is going to be set like such. What I'm going to do is just create a gradient like this, set it to none, set it to 40 for the black point and 60 for the white point. Then I'm going to multiply this, and then I'm going to grab that and put that in its own layer node. And I'm actually going to set that to 55 and 45, make it a little thinner, a lot thinner. And then I'm going to grab an effect called transform, and then I'm going to move it down in the transform. Let's see, actually I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is, instead of moving it down in the transform, I'm going to grab a gradient and add it. Apologies if that neighbor below blasting his bass is bothering you. I'm going to add that, and now that works. Okay, so what that does is that gradient is now going to chop that branch off, and now we have this effect right here, and I'm going to add a transform to that and scale it down in the x-axis, and then move it in the x-axis. And then I'm going to add another gradient, and this is going to be set to add as well, and then set to the interpolation type to none. And then I'm just going to move this back and forth until I get it to a position that's going to help chop off those edges. Okay, and that's the leaf. So there you go. And we could also add a distortion, and we could use a noise distortion with a noise scale of 1200. No, more like 20 or 10. And then a strength of 5. And then set the time scale to 0. Maybe set it to a little stronger. There we go. And then I'm going to set that below the transform, and then just adjust the movement. And then adjust the gradient. And now this will be the leaves, and that'll be good. I am going to copy this color though, and I'm going to create a gradient that's going to be, set that to 0. Nope, we can't. All right, let's just take the HSV values, 115, 87, and 47. So that's not going to work. Let's go ahead and grab the RGB color, 24, 119, and 15. 24, 119, and 15. Okay, so that's going to be that color, and then we're going to grab that color again, and we're just going to adjust it so that it's brown and desaturate it a little bit more, and then change that on the V axis, or the V, change it to a V, and then just give it kind of a gradient down here. And now we have our leaves. And as you can tell, all of these leaves are now spawning off upside down. And a good way to fix that is to just flip the geometry. So we're going to go ahead and grab the geometry at the very bottom, and then take that the enable axis tool and just rotate it 180 degrees. And it'd be a lot better to use an actual leaf photo in this case, but oops, I did that wrong. I'm going to enable the axis and rotate it on... Nope. Oh, you know what? I did it wrong. Axis center set to -100, not +100 on the z-axis. Okay. And then it'd be better to use real leaves or better textures, but this will work for now. And then we have our geometry all set up, and we can just set up a basic lighting setup right now. We're just going to use the ground and a physical sky for now. And we can go ahead and grab all of this. And this is something that's going to, take its time. I'm going to take the clone geo for the leaves, however, and add it to the scene. And it's going to take a little time to set up, but you can make this editable by taking all of these objects and turning them on. And I'm going to take that trunk and make it a lot smaller. Maybe even smaller than that. Okay, that's good. So now our leaves look pretty good. I'm going to hide our splines. Hit render, see what happens. I'm going to give a brown color to the branches. And then use a bump with noise. Oops. Set to displaced Voronoi. And set that to 300 in the general scale, and then 200 in the x-axis. Maybe 400, 500. Then I'm going to flip the colors and set that to be a lot stronger. And I'm going to grab the reflectance. I'm going to set it to be a lot weaker. Brighten it up a bit. Maybe not that much. And yeah, just pull that specularity down a bit. Maybe not that much. Maybe a little wider. Okay. And that'll be good for now. We'll just call that the branches. Oh, and we should probably apply that material. Okay, good. So there's our tree. And what we can do now is make it editable so we can reuse it. So what we're going to do is drag all of the leaves under a connect object, and then we're going to grab another connect object for all the branches. So these are going to be branches and then leaves. And I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to turn off the connect objects really quick. And turn off weld, because that's going to take a little bit longer. Then I'm going to right click and say current, or current state to object. And then I'm going to right click and say select children. And I'm going to, actually that's not going to work. It would almost work. I'm going to just go ahead and disable all of these. And then I'm going to take the leaves out of the TP clone geo object for now. And now we have our branches and leaves, and we're going to group that up and call that our tree. So obviously you'd like to probably texture that a little differently, but there you go. That'll be set, and then we can grab all of these. Holy crap, that's a lot of tags. One thing you can do is right click on these objects, and let's see, we can go to tags and select identical children tags. I don't know if that'll work. Let's see. Let's see if we can remove all the tags. I guess we can't. Well, I'm just going to go ahead. Oh, you know what I can do? I can use this. I can select these right here by holding shift and go to the very end and hold shift and then delete. So now that works. And I will delete the selection tags and hit render. And now we have leaves popping off of our tree. And we could just, take that tree right there. And this is branches, and this is leaves. And I'm going to delete the TP clone geo object, and now we have our tree. And I'm just going to hide everything else. And I'm going to drop that under a cloner object, put that on a grid array, set it to 1 or 3 by, or I'm going to set it to 5 by 5, or 5 by 1 by 5, and set it to 1200 by 1200, and grab a random effector. And now we have to set our random effector up. So what I'm going to do is just set it to the following settings, as you can see right here, and this is just going to give us some variation on the trees. I'm going to set that to be, also relative, or excuse me, render instances, and make sure that that random effector applies, to our cloner. Set it to 50 and 50, maybe 80 by 80. And then we can grab the cloner again and set it to 0.4. Grab the cloner object and set it to 8 by 8. And now we have our forest. Voila. And now if you replace those textures with something a little bit better, you can use a plane and use a shader effector. You could just apply all of these to a plane to use a grid, and then use a shader effector to make some of them disappear and scale them down and things like that. And that'd be a great way to work with this. One thing you need to do is when you're cloning this, make sure that you drop it in a connect object with everything in there. It's going kind of slow. Partially because I just dropped in an array, and that just adds a lot more geometry. I'm going to turn off weld. This is going to be tree. And since we're using the connect object, we don't need the null object, and this is going to be tree field, or we could just call it forest. And then we can name this forest random and hit render, and that should have everything ready to go. So one thing I'm noticing is that we aren't getting our leaves, and if we turn off render instance, that should also help solve that problem. Well, it's not, so I'm going to go ahead and debug that, and then we'll finish. So really quick, while I'm fixing the problem, I do want to point out that the leaves are there, they just aren't rendering. So that could be a texturing problem, that could be a number of things. So what I'm going to do is just open up that texture and turn off the alpha. I'm going to change that count from 8 to 4 by 4 instead of 8 by 8 as well, and that'll help render a lot quicker. And turning off the alpha has helped. Gonna tweak those settings. There we go. So turn off soft, and then change it so that it is not inverted, and then use image alpha. Oh, that's weird. I guess what you need to do, since the gradients aren't really copying over properly, what we're going to want to do is go ahead and take this texture, and then you're going to want to, well, I mean, you'd want to use an image texture anyways, but what you could do is copy this channel and then create a new material. I'm just going to do this in a new scene and set that as the layer or the luminance channel. Okay, and then I'm going to apply that to a plane and drop it on. Okay, and then I'm going to right click on that and bake the texture. and that's just going to get set as a PNG. In this case, we're going to just bake it to, where am I at? Tutorials, make a tree, leaf, alpha. Okay. And we could set that to 256 by 256 and just bake the luminance channel. Hit preview, make sure it's good, and then hit bake, and then it's all saved off. And then we can close the scene down because we don't need it anymore. And then we're going to go to the alpha and go ahead and just click that button on the side. I'm going to go back into my folder and hit render. Turn off soft. Well, that's really strange, guys. Anyways, I'm gonna not spend more time on this one now, for this particular one, because I do need to get going. But theoretically, this is how it's set up, and the texturing is just something that we're gonna have to focus on another day. This is actually how you can generate a tree, though, and you just change those values in here for the curl noise and the dynamics and the timing of everything, and you will get, 10,000 different variations of trees, and you could build your own little library by setting this up once and do it in a weekend. And then you can, either use that for yourself or put it online for others to use, things like that. Making free stuff and putting it online is a great way to get people's attention and build focus on your website. And anyways, that's how you can build trees. So one last thing is to look at the ivy grower plugin and grow some ivy, and then look at how they texture things. That'll help you. So once again, this is a video brought to you by the TP Toolkit Pro, which we're using here, which you can find at thinkparticle.com. And if you go ahead and go to thinkparticle.com, you can find a bunch of other stuff like our cloud generator, which is our most popular product. It's also our oldest. You can also now save when you're buying by going to bundles. We have the Octane Studio Kit now released. So if you use Octane, this is a great way to go ahead and render with Octane a lot quicker. Octane's already stupid fast, and using the Octane Studio Kit is even faster for workflow. And I'll even show you in a, I've posted another tutorial as well recently that shows you how to create planets like this procedurally in Octane, including the clouds, which are pretty cool. So go ahead and check out the bundles. You save a lot of money that way. And for watching this video, you can also get the TP Toolkit Pro. I have a coupon code called TP Tree. So I'm going to create a new scene really quick and add some Mo text so you can see that. And it's called TP Tree, just as is, just like that. So use the coupon code TP Tree, and you can save 10% on the TP Toolkit Pro. So go ahead and check that out. And thank you very much for watching. I'm Sam Welker from thinkparticle.com, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.